The Book of Ka. 3. The Code. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Yet when I opened my eyes, Usher was sitting in the chair next to my pallet where I lay. My body felt battered, and my head pounded incessantly. It was as if I, and not Usher, had been the one beaten. Though, from what I could see of the old man's lumpy and purple face, he fared much worse than I.
Well, finally,
the old man stated and handed me a cup with water in it.
Drink slowly,
he admonished as I began to drink greedily from the cup.
You've been out for 3 days, he cautioned, and you will not react well if you overfill yourself too quickly.
Forcing myself to sip the water, I asked, "The village?" The old man shook his head.
"Gone,"
he grunted, and went to his little cook fire.
"Those that were left."
I looked around. "Then we must leave." He eyed me with his good eye. The other was swollen closed.
"And just where would we go? The next temple? Do you know where that is yet?"
I shook my head and I regretted it, pain blooming from the base of my skull. "No, I'm not who you thought I was, though. I can't do this."
"Do what?"
he asked. "Use the Ka. Hurt people, kill people," I groaned.
"Then don't do it next time, or not that way,"
he told me, something like kindness in his eye. I just stared at him. He shook his head.
"You're so intelligent that sometimes I forget you are still a child. Yeah, but 10 to 12 years old."
"What?" I asked. "I don't understand."
"You will come to find that sometimes there is no choice but to harm others, if only to protect yourself."
He paused, taking a deep breath.
"In this new world of warlords and petty tyrants, there will be little choice at times."
"So, are we in hell?" I asked.
"If you would have told me all this,"
he waved his arms to take in the temple around us,
"I would have told you that it sounded like a really bad movie, or a sadistic one."
"We will have to leave, you know. Anyway," I pondered, my eyes down.
"And just why would we do that?"
The old man seemed genuinely confused.
"The villagers that were left gave us several mules full of canned vegetables. Canned them themselves, they did. Bags of grain and dried beef. We can hunt for fresh meat. Whatever else we need. We should last us a good while."
"If those men," I stopped and rephrased, "or if this Corbin Raw found the village, he'll find his way here." Usher shook his head.
"I don't think so. And your crystal thing has sealed the valley, or says she has. And she assures me that these temples were set up to be invisible to the Ra."
"Convenient," I said. The old man shrugged.
"Just like a bad movie."
"What now?" I asked, though I didn't know what a movie was.
"When you wrote that crystal, it seemed to signal the beginning of your instruction," he said.
"So she speaks to you?" I asked. He eyed me before going to the little fire and pulling the hanging pot off of it to set it upon a cloth pad on the table. After sitting and ladling what smelled like a stew into 2 wooden bowls, he spoke.
"It did indeed."
"Then you know?" I asked, forcing my sore body up over to the table.
"That I am far older than I thought? That I can touch the Ka but not use it? And that it has extended my life far beyond what it should have been? I feel like old Methuselah from the book."
He shrugged and stared into his bowl. "This is all too big, you know," I told him.
"For one person, sure,"
he admitted, looking up to meet my eyes. I'm only one person, I told him. He shook his head.
There will be others. That crystal says that there are others who have touched the car without knowing it. And they are being drawn here, just as you were.
I was confused. I thought she said she sealed the temple.
Come, he sighed. Just eat. Then go to that room with the crystal and let it explain your answers to your questions. It is a little much for me as well, you know.
I just nodded and took a spoonful of the stew. Blew on it. Having it cool just a bit, I began to eat. I didn't realize how ravenous I was, and didn't even mind the fact that the rest of it was scalding hot.
Slowly, he admonished me again. You haven't eaten anything for several days. Give your stomach time to catch up, or you won't keep it down and we'll have to clean up the mess.
I found myself in the room with the crystal sometime later, sitting on my knees. I will begin with the history of the car, she spoke as soon as I relaxed. Why not begin with what happened? I said. Because you do not have a frame of reference for what I must tell you about that, she said. Begin then, I said. When the world was new, God created Adam. The power of creation was one of such forces that the very energy that bound chaos to life, the power of order itself, abounded upon the world, upon the universe. Adam, having been born directly from that power, could manipulate and wield it, and he called it the car. This has the sound and rhythm of a fairy tale, I pointed out. And it is a fairy tale, so to speak. Yes, it was for the time of the architects as well, Crystal noted. But this is their best recollection of events, and it gives us insights into the nature of the car and its use. Her voice paused. Do you not see some of that already, as it pertains to your situation? I nodded slowly and began working it out. If the car is the power of order, of creation, then my use of it to destroy, the antithesis of its genesis?
You are the first, you, Khan. Were chosen to be the first, but more will come to you, and they are your responsibility, she stated. But if you've sealed the valley, not for them. You will guide them the last steps of the way, and you will know it by the time they arrive. I shook my head. I can't do this. Oh, you will do it. Why would you think otherwise? Crystal asked. I can't even defend myself and Usher without crippling my head for days. You did it the wrong way, the soft voice spoke. You will learn. How? If I use the call to kill or destroy. I left off shuddering. The memory of the pain was almost a fire at the base of my skull. The memory of pain itself. It is time, then? The voice spoke. A grating sound came from the back of the room. Check the alcove and you will begin your first step in learning how you can use the car to defend yourself and others. I stood and walked toward the back of the room. A deep alcove had appeared in the wall, the stone seeming to have melted away. The hole was deep and almost large enough for me to fit into. I reached in and found... What are these? I asked, pulling a sword as long as an adult's arm, slightly curved, the blade black and seemingly sharp. The alcove also held a harness of black straps made of a strange material I couldn't identify. In it was a sheath, and attached to it was a sheath, and in that sheath was a second blade, a smaller version of the first. They were once called the Toda, used in an old form of martial sport. It could be theorized that it is a form of martial combat
that all others have evolved from. And how will I learn to use these? No one alive remembers this martial art, I said, my eyes locked on the obsidian blades. What are they made for? And of? I asked, mesmerized. I could almost see colors, deep blues and purples, flashing through the blade in the light, as if its inky darkness tried to swallow it. A very rare stone, she said. It is near indestructible in light. These weapons were made with the call, and only one who can touch the call can use them to their full effect. And the harness? I asked. The skin of an animal that no longer exists and was wiped out during the cataclysm, Crystal noted. What your ancestors called dragons. So, even fairy tales and such were real during the time of the architects? I asked. Some of the myths and stories you refer are so old that they've been stripped down and rebuilt many times, the voice said. So we still have a problem, I said, pulling my gaze away from the sword. One will come, Crystal stated. He already is drawn to you, and has been since you arrived. Others have also heard their call, and will arrive. How? I asked. Once you touched the call in this place, once you called to it, and it gave you your name, others, strong with natural ability, felt this, and in a way they could not comprehend, and have been drawn, even as yourself, to this place, to learn what the first temple has to teach, Crystal said. Again, I just shook my head, bringing my attention back to the swords. Touch them with the call, she instructed. I closed my eyes and let go, giving myself to the power, and then touched the sword with it. If I felt the heat even as I opened my eyes, to bright flames licking the sword's blade, with its edges appearing as white, hot lines. I let it go, and the flames died from the stone. Just stone once more, no lines of force, no fire. Like in the Book of the Five Rings, 2 swords, I whispered. An instance of one rediscovering something that was lost long ago, Crystal spoke in my mind. Why fire? I asked. Fire seems to be your natural affinity. Others will have an affinity to ice, others to wind, and still others to the earth itself. Can Usher use these? I asked. That is possible, though his natural talent for touching the call is weak, Crystal spoke. Most of his abilities are dedicated to slowing the aging of his body for his purpose. I nodded. How could we get more? In answer, there was another long moment when the grinding sound of the stone began, and it melted away all around me. 10 more alcoves opened. You will eventually learn to make your own, and with the help of this temple, will teach others how to craft the swords. The voice paused. You will call up the stone from the earth, but only the strongest of the call will achieve this ability, be able to craft their own weapons. So a limit upon power, I mused. What's the difference between these and the ones I would craft myself? The call will bind them to you, help you magnify an aspect of the call that you have yet to learn. She spoke this as if there were specific information she was designed to provide by rote. They will become attuned to your style and help them move with you. I was stunned. How could the architects have foreseen this? A need for a weapon that was not powered by technology or chemistry. I suppose the Ra have their own versions of this? I asked. All is balance. It is the absolute rule of the universe, is based upon, Crystal stated. There have to be rules. I knew that, just as I knew that there was set up to have confrontations and struggles. There has to be, I don't know, laws, rules, I said before, more to myself than to Crystal. Ever as it was, there was a code. The crystal voice spoke once again in my mind. And just what would this code be?
That is for you to understand.
And what would you suggest I start learning? I asked, sheathing the sword in its harness. To continue as you have, learning pathways to touch the Ka, so that it becomes a second nature, how it can enhance your senses, how it can increase your reflexes and strength, how you can use it to manipulate and predict, she listed. Also, you must start with the physical fitness routine, train to fight, so that when the time comes, you will increase your chances of achieving a martial skill. How long until the teacher arrives? I asked. I can only state of a certainty that he has been called and is journeying to the temple. I cannot predict how long that journey will take, Crystal said. It took 3 years, and I was on watch and saw the man as he came up the path, the little valley that held the entrance to the temple. His long black hair was pulled up in a top knot, and he was far older than I, in his 30s perhaps. Not nearly as old as Usher looked, but older than my 13 or 15 years. He wore homespun traveling clothes and carried a pack. 2 swords, one sheathed upon his back and the other smaller at his waist. Startled me almost. "Ho, traveler!" I called, waving a hand. The man stopped, his expression curious and apprehensive. With a caution, I approached him. "Hello, my name is Adi." I introduced myself. The man waited. "I am called Kozashi Miramoto, of no house." His voice was low, reserved, and resonant. I nodded. "Do you know why you're here?" I asked. The man's eyes narrowed. "I wonder. I have always wondered. This is just where I've wondered today." My head nodded as I smiled. "You feel the pull?" The man was silent, his face holding no expression to tell me his thoughts. And I knew it was rude to touch one's mind with the Ka, especially when you saw them as a potential brother and ally. "Well, welcome to the first temple of Ka," I informed him. "The Ka," he murmured, his eyes searching mine before he looked at the rocky path. "Some temple." "Come," I told him. "I'll introduce you to Usher and Crystal, and you'll get some answers, Swordmaster." The man's eyes sharpened in surprise. "Why would you call me this?" "Swordmaster?" I asked. "Just so." He seemed irritated. "I have known that one would come who was a master of the blade for years now," I informed him as I turned and began to walk. "How would you know this?" I asked. He asked, his voice prodding. "The Ka," I told him. "All this will make sense soon." He was silent as we climbed our way up to the entrance of the temple. You could almost feel his resolve, though I didn't know what he was resolving himself to. Perhaps he was preparing to be attacked. The world was not a safe place, and trust was almost something that was a legend from another age. We entered the temple to find Usher hovering over a boiling pot of stew that filled the whole of the ash chamber with a warm and inviting savory odor. "Welcome, Swordmaster," he said, noticing us as we came across the floor. "I am no Swordmaster, honored elder," Kazashi stated. Usher and I looked at one another and smiled. This wasn't the one, then. "My name is Kozashi Miramoto, of no house," he introduced himself to Usher. "Elder?" Usher looked back at me. "You'd better take him to the crystal." Usher refused to refer to the crystal as a person, though He agreed with my assessment that she was a form of ancient artificial intelligence.
You may leave your pack and weapons here. There's no one to fight,
Usher told him. The man shook his head, causing his topknot to sway as if the wind had caught it. I will leave nothing, especially my swords. They are aspects of my soul. Come, I told him, and led him the way deeper into the temple where Crystal's room lay. Adi Khan, Crystal spoke in my head, noticing that Kazashi jumped as she did, startling him. It seemed to unsettle him, as if he hadn't been surprised in a very long time.
It is the crystal that speaks,
he said slowly. I nodded. She has some things to tell you and to teach you.
You trust me enough to leave me here?
He asked. I answered him with an assured smile. Come eat when you're done and we will talk. After a long hour, Kozashi found us waiting at the table. Kozashi, I said, standing. His face was pale and troubled. For now, call me Zashi. That is what my brothers called me.
For now?
Usher asked. The man dropped into a chair next to Usher and nodded. Once, when starts training, must refer to the master as master until you are deemed sufficiently trained. Usher laughed. I'm afraid I'm a little long in the tooth for such things. Zashi shook his head. Not for all that I can teach. So you are the sword master, I said, confirming what I thought when I saw him. And he shook his head. Not a sword master. He spoke as Usher ladled 3 bowls full of the hearty stew. My last master named me the Toda. It literally means what master of combat. He told us quietly as if he didn't really believe what was happening. And I knew the word. It was the name of the swords, after all. The Toda is the master of fighting. The term includes all forms of unarmed and armed combat. Why would you give yourself that name in particular? I asked, giving Usher a quick, startled look. I have mastered all 5 schools of swordsmanship. I understand the use of the feet and hands and the grapple. I have blended all the forms of martial arts I could find, he told us. But why Toda? I asked. He shook his head and sighed. Before I left his school, I asked Master Kenzu the same thing, but he had no memory of giving me the title. Usher's face grew sour. You say? Just like a bad movie. I shook my head. It is unbelievable, Zashi admitted. A thought came into my head. Why did you learn all this fighting? His face became hard. I must tell you, I suppose. When I was young, no more than 6, my father gave me an apprenticeship with a master swordsmith. It took long years to learn my craft, and even as I learned the art of folding the steel, my master taught me the basics of a sword's use. He paused, his eyes lost in memory. After I'd become a journeyman, I traveled back to the farm my father owned. Zashi paused, his face growing angry. When I arrived, it was gone. Completely gone. As if wiped from the face of the world. What happened? Usher asked. He was lost in the story. I found out in my village that one called Ra happened. He stood and began to pace. A warlord who supposedly had power. So I set to learn everything I could in order to challenge this monster. Who are you, Adi? Why are you here? Zashi asked. He is the Khan, Adi Khan,
The first of the Ka,
Usher said. The crystal says that even as I train you, you will train me, and we both will come to learn more than we could imagine. More than we could have learned on our own, it seems. He said this and sat down. I have a code, Zashi said. My ears perked up. And what is this code? I asked.
Never will I use my skills for evil. Never will I use my skills for offense. Never will I teach one who has not proven himself of studied character,
he stated. That was not the code. It was a code, something in which I wanted. And I closed my eyes, touching the Ka. And I spoke the Ka in my voice. Passion tempered by peace. Skill tempered with wisdom. Power tempered by charity. Leadership diffused among many. Violence a last resort. The Ka given to guide us. The Ka given to hold us. This is the path of the Ka. Here ends the third part of this kind of spec story. Thank you for listening. This is as far as I've gotten in the writing. And as always, remember that these stories are little more than rough drafts placed on YouTube primarily to get feedback and criticism. All these stories will be rewritten and polished and added to. Once that's completed, I'll repost them. So your criticism is invaluable, for it's taken into consideration during the rewrite. I hope to begin that process in about 6 weeks, perhaps longer, but not much. That time allows the story to bake and percolate in my subconscious, but also allow me to forget it a bit, so that my mind does not fill in any holes. It allows me to see problems and flaws and those holes and fix them. So, it would be very helpful if you left some criticism for this story, good, bad, or ugly. And also, though it's not mandatory, please, if you have not, subscribe, like this video, and share it amongst those you think would like it. And, as always, your life is your story. Make it a great one, and have a blessed day.